Hi everyone, I'm Lorraine from Simply English Edinburgh. Welcome back to my channel. And today I'm really lucky to be joined by a good friend of mine. Her name is Kim. She's from California, and we basically just had a video call together where we discussed some variations in pronunciation and vocabulary when comparing American English and my dialect, which is Hiberno English, so Irish English. We chatted a bit about standard British English as well, and of course the dialect here is Scottish English because we both live in Edinburgh. This is where we met. So yeah, we had a lot of fun. I think you'll find this video quite interesting, and if you could leave a like if you are enjoying it, that would be really helpful to me because I'll know that you enjoy videos where I bring guests along. So yeah, here it is. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim. I am originally from Orange County, California, so I grew up in the southern part near Los Angeles, but I have been living in Edinburgh for the last 9 years. I work for a university. I help teach teachers, but in my free time, I like to travel, go on adventures, explore new countries, explore the UK, and watch really, really bad reality TV. Today I put together some fun words that are pronounced one way in the US and one way in the UK. So I hope you enjoy hearing the differences in our accents, and hopefully this will make you think of some other words that weren't included in this list that may be pronounced differently. Enjoy the video. Thank you so much.
Hi Kim, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Good. I'm so happy to be here. I love talking about the differences between American English and British English.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot. And you've been living here for 9
I've been here about 9 years off and on.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because obviously we met when we studied together in Edinburgh. So, and have you, obviously in your time here, you must have noticed a lot of differences in pronunciation, vocabulary, everything.
Yeah, there's been a lot. Like my favorite is always still sidewalk and pavement.
It's so different. Like if you said to me like, oh, step on the sidewalk, I'd be like, where is it? What is it? It's so different.
And for us, pavement would be like the street. It would be anything that had like concrete or anything that wasn't grass, basically, would be pavement.
But for us, pavement is very much where people walk. And for you, it could be the road where the cars are driving as well. So
exactly. Yeah. So there's things like that. And, you know, just sometimes people will correct me when I say certain words. They're like, oh, you mean? So, you know, things like that are really funny, or that can automatically place me. Like people go, oh, you're definitely from North America because you pronounce, you know, words a certain way.
And I mean, you're from California, so would you say that you've the kind of standardized accent for that area, or a little bit of influence from other areas as well?
No, so I have a very standard California accent. And it's funny to me when people say that I have an accent, because in California, or because in the US, I would be considered to have no accent. It would be a very flat,
standardized like US accent. Okay.
Yeah. So it's always really funny to me when people say, "Oh, I love your accent."
Yeah.
Like, I don't have one.
Yeah, that's funny. But I guess that's a lot to do with the fact that so many, you know, films and TV series are made in California. I mean, you live not that far from Hollywood. So
no, I grew up about like an hour and a half drive, depending on traffic, and Los Angeles traffic is a thing of beauty. So yeah, a lot of film, a lot of television. That's, you know, it's filmed there, it's made there. A lot of actors, when they are, you know, training, even if they're not from California, they tend to learn that California accent.
Right.
So someone from Boston has obviously like a really thick accent, or someone from Texas that has that kind of Southern, slow and easy accent. They would go to voice lessons and learn how to speak in a California accent because it's considered the neutral accent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, from the moment we met, I mean, I knew you were from the States. I didn't, I wasn't able to pinpoint where. And you knew I was Irish quite obviously as well. I mean, what are kind of the things you would pick up on my accent that you would say makes me, okay, she's Irish 100%?
It's, I think it's the inflection. So for me, the Irish accent is very lyrical. It's very musical. And you have a way of speaking that just sounds nicer.
I don't know if it's nicer, but it is quite distinct.
Yeah. And there's just something about an Irish accent that, I don't know, it sounds, like I said, it's something in that lyrical quality where like a typical English accent or a Scottish accent, to me, a typical English accent sounds like, it reminds me of a California accent where it's like neutral.
Yeah.
Where that's like the standard because that's what you hear on TV and on the radio. Mm-hmm. And a Scottish accent to me can sometimes sound quite harsh. Mm-hmm. Like it's a very guttural, like harsh sound.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, the Irish accent is very lyrical and it's much more musical. It's got a musical quality.
That's interesting. And I mean, as we said, there are many differences in both how we pronounce different words and even the words, the vocabulary itself that we use is different. So you have kindly prepared a little presentation.
Yeah, I never lose that kind of teacher quality. I feel like it hangs out with me all the time. So yeah, I made some slides that I hope will be helpful while we go through this. Also because the words are different. If people can see the visual, it might make it a bit easier for everybody.
Okay, great. So let's get into it.
Okay, so this is USA versus Ireland in correct pronunciations of words. I have to say though, this was kind of funny for me because I've been living here so long. My vocabulary has changed, so I often do use the more UK pronunciation for some of these things. But for today, I'm going to give you my best US accent.
Love it. Let's get started.
So the first thing I thought we'd start with is the alphabet, because there are 2 letters of the alphabet that we pronounce very differently, and that affects the way we say other words. So in the US, we would say that the image on the left is the letter H. Mm-hmm. And what would you say?
I'd say H. So the very pronounced at the start. Yeah, so that's quite different.
And then the last letter of the alphabet, we in the US would say that's the letter Z.
Yeah, and we say Z. And it's very different, isn't it? And I actually heard a joke about someone saying like, you're wrong here. Like he's not JZ, he's JZ. That's
exactly the example that I use when I try and tell people like, you should say Z. And I'm like, it's JZ. The minute he starts calling himself JZ, I'll change it. But until then, JZ.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So in thinking about that pronunciation, then what would you say the name of this store is?
I'd say H&M.
Yeah. Where I would say H&M.
Yeah. So it's quite different. You've a very H, like you're not making the kind of unvoiced sound at the beginning.
No, we're making more of like an A sound. So it's like the A. So it'd be H&M, as opposed to H&M. Although now I tend to say H&M because I've been
better understood here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then my favorite, what is this animal?
Well, for me it's a zebra.
For me it's a zebra.
Zebra. Yeah, I love it. You hear both though, don't you? Like you really commonly hear both. But yeah, obviously it is stemming from, as you said, the different pronunciation of that letter, in that you say Z, I say Z, and then that influences how we would say the name of this animal. So that's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I think too, I often kind of think because Edinburgh itself is such an international city that that's probably why we hear both, because tourists come from all over, and depending on where certain countries like learned English. So like in North America and even South America, they tend to learn North American English.
Yeah,
So their pronunciations then tend to be, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, people from Spain or Europe or even many Asian countries, like they learn British English. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then I thought we'd move on to food, because I love food and there's a lot of fun food related terms, which also make it fun when you're shopping for groceries.
Yes, exactly.
So this one's one of my favorites because so in the US we would say tomato, where we don't have like an emphasis really on any syllable.
Yeah. Whereas for us, it's a very different tomato with the stress, as you have there written in bold on the tomato.
Yeah. And to me, like you saying that, it sounds right. Like it sounds correct. It sounds like an okay word. And if you said tomato, it would probably sound just as correct. Yeah. But if I say tomato, it
sounds kind of ridiculous almost, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds so I always say tomato. Again, this is one of the words that definitely highlights where I'm from.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I quite like it.
And it's one of those things where, like, obviously I can perfectly understand what you mean when you say tomato. But as you said, yeah, it characterizes your US accent as being like, oh, she pronounces it like that. So she's definitely from the United States. So that was an interesting one.
So this one is,
you have rights to this one, okay, because it's not that common here, but you can tell us a little bit about how you use this.
Yeah,
it's not, isn't it? Yeah.
So this is a type of nut, and in the US it is baked into pies at Thanksgiving. So obviously Thanksgiving is a very US holiday. It is also celebrated in Canada, but for the most part is primarily a US holiday, and this is baked into a pie as a dessert. So it's this and caramel and honey with a nice, like, thick, fluffy crust. And again, this is one that also has variations in pronunciation, even in the US. So I say pecan.
So it's a really long pecan, really, really long. Yeah, I mean, it's a word we stumble over because we're not even sure about it. So yeah, pecan, like we've different ways.
So in the US, you'll hear my version, pecan, is pretty common in like the South.
Okay.
So in the southern states like Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, that area. But you'll also hear pecan. Okay. And that's probably a bit more common everywhere else.
Okay.
But yeah, it's if you ever have the chance to have a pecan pie, I suggest.
It's really good. I like the sound of the caramel and honey, to be honest.
Yeah, it's very sweet, and to me it's nice because like a pumpkin pie isn't as sweet, and I like really sweet treats.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah. So this one, again, this is one where the pronunciation of the letters of the alphabet come into play. So for us, if we were, looking at this picture, we would say these are herbs. Mm-hmm. So we completely ditched the H. The H becomes silent, and we would say we're going to use a lot of herbs in our sauce, or we need to buy some herbs at the market.
Yeah, whereas we would include that H and say herbs.
Yeah. And this is another one where I've adopted that into my vocabulary now. So I would say herbs now. And even some of
Sorry, no, go on.
I was gonna say even some of the herbs are pronounced differently here. So what we would call coriander here, we would call cilantro in the US. Right. We use the
totally
Spanish.
Different. Yeah, really, really different. Yeah.
So things like that. So that was one of the grocery store fails for me the first time. I love coriander. I think it belongs in as many dishes as possible. And I was at the market in the herb section and I was like, I can't find cilantro anywhere. And I was like,
such a difference. It's crazy. Like you would never, like I've only heard of cilantro in TV series, like in New Girl or in Big Bang Theory. I've heard them cooking and asking about it. Actually, there is one episode in New Girl where Jess says to Nick, "What, you've never had cilantro?" And I remember being like, "I've never had cilantro either. I don't know what it is." So, but yeah, it is. It's completely different.
You actually have had it when I make you come over for taco nights. Yes. I put it in everything.
There's no making me come over for tacos when you're cooking. Like, it's a pretty good choice on my part when I do come over. So
yeah. So this is another one. In the US, we'd call this an eggplant. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure why, but we'd call it an eggplant. Mm-hmm. And here, obviously,
aubergine.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's one of those things, again, if you asked someone in a supermarket here, like, do you have any eggplants? They'd kind of like give you that confused.
What is an eggplant? Yeah, because it has nothing to do with an egg. So it's like, how is it that?
It literally has nothing to do with eggs. It doesn't even look, it's not egg shaped. There's nothing.
No, exactly. But I think we hear eggplant a bit more because people do refer to it as the eggplant emoji. So rather than like the aubergine, it sounds a bit like fancy, but
and then this is one of those things too where, like, if you were in a supermarket in the US and said, like, where are your aubergines, they'd be like,
what is that? I've never heard of it ever. Yeah, exactly. So really different. Yeah, that is a good one.
And a fun fact that I learned when putting this together, aubergines are actually fruit. I thought they were vegetables.
Really? Oh wow.
It's actually fruit. So that's your fun fact.
Love it. You learn something new every day.
Yeah. Okay, so these next few are ones where the difference in what we call them in the US and what we call them here also affect other foods. Yeah. So we would call this a cookie. Mm-hmm. So we would say these are, cookies. Yeah. But in the UK, we would hear them referred to as
biscuits. Yeah. I mean, cookie is kind of, that term is coming a little bit more, and we're hearing it a bit more. But biscuits is the typical word that we would use here. And I mean, even for that whole section of the supermarket, it would be the biscuit aisle, not the cookie aisle, for example. So
yeah, exactly. Whereas in the US, for us, a biscuit looks like this. Okay. It's like
so different. Yeah, for me, that looks more like a scone, or as you said, maybe a roll, depending on the ingredients, but not a biscuit. Like, if I asked for a biscuit and that came out, I would be like, what? Yeah.
It's really, so we, in the US, we tend to make biscuits when we're doing things like barbecue. So like ribs, or any kind of meat that you're cooking on a barbecue.
It's very savory. It's totally different.
Yeah. So you would do biscuits and you would do gravy. So biscuits and gravy.
It's also sound, even for me, because of what I'm associating with the word biscuit, is just wrong.
This is why it's so funny, because if you think biscuit, like most people will think of like the digestives.
Yes.
Exactly. That are usually have chocolate on one side, and you can imagine that with like turkey gravy.
No,
it's not. No. It's not good. So It's really popular in the US, and because I know we have KFCs here, to do biscuits and gravy with your chicken, and you basically just drench the biscuit in gravy so it becomes like kind of soggy, and
I mean, it just sounds because you're using the word biscuit, I'm just like revolted, but
exactly.
I have to imagine that it's this.
Yeah, so think of it like a bread roll,
Okay.
or like a savory scone that you would put like a sauce on.
Yeah.
But this can also be used with breakfast. So in the South, you do biscuits and gravy with eggs. So you do like scrambled eggs and ham with some cheese, and then your biscuits and your gravy. Yeah, it's quite an experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was going to say that is not just a linguistic, but like a cultural difference.
It's a massive cultural difference. Yeah. Southern breakfasts are very like, that's its own thing. Yeah. We wouldn't necessarily eat them for breakfast in California. So for us, a biscuit like this is a dinner time food or lunchtime, but not breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. Not before the middle of the day.
Yeah. So this one, everybody's favorite.
Everyone freaks out over this. So for me, these are crisps, like crisps. Yes. And for you,
these are potato chips.
Yeah.
We call them chips, or we'd say potato chips. But yeah, so these to us are chips, which here, if you say chips, you then think of...
You're expecting this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
These for me are chips.
And we would call them French fries.
Yeah.
We'd call them fries or French fries. So that is another funny thing when you are at restaurants with people from the US and they're like, oh, it comes with chips, like a dinner that comes with potato chips.
Yeah.
Like,
It must sound really strange. Yeah. I mean, the only time you would really see fries on a menu is in your typical chain restaurant, like McDonald's, KFC, they list it as fries, but I would always say like a burger and chips. And obviously they know to bring me these, of course.
Yeah. And I always just remind people, because in the US, fish and chips is like the quintessential British meal. Like when people think of England and like what a real English meal is, they think of fish and chips and peas. I'm not sure why, but that's what they think is like English food. But then you try and you remind them, fish and chips means fish and
with
fries,
as you would say. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is the last one in the kind of food category, and this, I guess, not technically food, but important, and most of us take with food.
Yeah, exactly. So we would say vitamin.
And we would say vitamin.
Yeah. It's so American when I hear vitamin.
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 Yeah. So we would say, in Scotland, we don't get a lot of vitamin D.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And we'd say we're vitamin D deficient. Yeah.
Yeah. And this one's, again, this is a funny one that I have adopted. So I will say vitamin. And when I'm talking to my parents or to anyone in the US, they're like, what?
Yeah.
You said that wrong? Did you say that wrong? So we get that a lot. But I think that one's funny. There's a lot of actually like scientific vocabulary that's pronounced very differently. So even some of the elements, like I would say aluminum.
Yeah, that is so different. And I would say aluminium.
Yeah, which is actually closer to how it's spelled.
Yeah.
So you would say it with like proper phonetic, the proper phonetics, whereas I don't know where aluminum.
It just sounds like a shortened version. It's all scrunched together, but
yeah.
That is quite funny.
But yeah, so if you're ever feeling like, if there's any budding scientists out there, if you look up, chemical compounds and different, I don't know what you call them on the periodic, different elements.
Elements, I guess. Yeah.
And even certain medications or vitamins and things like that are pronounced differently. So anyone who's thinking about being a scientist, or anyone who's like really scientifically minded, you can have a whole fun day looking up those kinds of words. I didn't think those would be so important for everyday vocabulary, so I have not included them. But in case anyone wants to keep going.
Nice.
So now I've got just a few phrases or a few words that you might hear in your everyday life that sound very different, but have like really big differences. So it's really noticeable. So the first one.
Yeah, we would say leisure, like even a leisure center, could be a sports center.
And we would say leisure.
Leisure, yeah, leisure. It's so different.
It is so different. So this again is, for us, we wouldn't necessarily say like a leisure center. Okay. For us, that would be like a sports center, or a community center or something like that. But we would say leisure in like, your free time. So how you spent your time not working. So in your leisure time, so like in my leisure time, I like to read, I like to travel, I like to watch bad reality television. So that's how I spend, my free time.
Yeah, exactly. And do you even say, because we would say like leisure wear, meaning like tracksuits, comfortable clothes. So would you say leisure wear?
So we would actually call that lounge wear.
Lounge, okay, yeah.
Yeah. But there are things, like leisure suits. That used to be like a big thing. And that is, like the typical like tracksuit.
Yeah, for chilling around your house kind of a thing, yeah.
Well, no. So a leisure suit was like the fancy one. That's the one you like wore to go out and like be cool. Okay. So it was like fancy. It maybe had like, jewels or some sort of design or.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one's a good one. This one, I guess, probably not as common for some people, depending on, how you spend your days, but because it's such a big difference in pronunciation, I thought that it was a fun one.
It is. It's a good one.
This is my favorite one.
Yeah, it is. It's really different. So we'd say schedule.
And we'd say schedule.
It's like, where is the K coming from? Where is the K? But I mean, yeah, you do also, though, here in the UK, people saying schedule. And I feel like I now alternate between the two, just depending on the situation that I'm in, or almost automatically, because both are so frequently used, I would say.
Yeah. And so like for me, I work for a university, so it's very academic, and people tend to speak like with very posh accents. Okay. And I've noticed the more important the job, so the people who are like deans or like really high up in management will say schedule.
Really? Okay.
Whereas like a lot of the lecturers, or like for me, so I work in academic development, so I'm helping teach teachers, we say schedule. So I do notice that there's a bit of a difference that way, but for the most part here I hear schedule. But this used to be something on TV that we'd hear. So if ever there was like a British character or an Irish character, you would hear them say schedule, because it is so different. So it was one of those like stereotypical differences that they'd highlight, other than just, the accent.
Yeah, exactly. Nice.
So this one is another one that I think, like you said, with schedule, kind of varies depending on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm seeing here how in Ireland it is typical, privacy, but I would also say privacy as well. And I think it's just the kind of American influence, as we would say, through the sort of TV series we're watching, and, advertising and different things, which is also another one that's coming up, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, privacy, yes, is very common, but I would actually also use the US version, which you have down as privacy.
Privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, again, to me, here again, yeah, it's the same thing. Like I hear privacy, I think more.
Yeah, than you would hear privacy, but it does exist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then this is another one that is fun.
I think there are like even more ways of saying this word. I would say advertisement.
And I would say advertisement.
Yeah, you've such a strong eye there, advertisement.
Yeah.
And I actually know for a fact that I have a friend who says advertisement.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's just a different variation again.
And even the shortening of it. So like we, like in the US, we wouldn't always say advertisement. We would just say there's an ad for this.
Yeah. And we would say ad and advert as well. Yeah. We would actually have the slightly longer. And I guess this is again also something that social media we use now kind of more ad, because that is what they're saying, like, oh, you see an ad for whatever. But traditionally in the UK and Ireland, we would maybe have said more advert.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something again that I tend to say advert. So saying that to my family, they're like, what?
Yeah. An enigma of a word, because it's actually so long in the first place that I think there are multiple acceptable ways to pronounce it, which is
exactly
fair enough.
Yeah. So that is my list of fun words. There's obviously there's a whole lot more, and you can think about them. Some of you who are into cars, there's a lot of differences in the way we talk about cars. So for us, the storage part in the back of your car is the trunk.
Yeah, for us it's a boot.
Yeah,
totally different. Yeah, for me, trunk. When I think of trunk, I think on an elephant or on a tree.
Yeah, exactly.
A car.
And so we have that for trunk, but we'd also think of like a really big suitcase, like an old-fashioned suitcase too.
Oh, right. Okay, like the huge ones, like the ones that went on the Titanic, like those massive ones. Okay, yeah, that is true.
So there's things like that too that that you can think of, and I'd be curious to know too what like some of your students or anyone who's gonna be able to see this video, like what they think of or know, because I think there's going to be a lot that maybe I haven't even thought of.
Oh, loads, I imagine. Yeah, definitely. But one thing I would definitely say is a lot of people do worry about, oh, well, when I went to primary school, I studied British English, and then I moved to the States and I was learning, more typical American English. But I would say whatever variation you're learning, like, it's commonly understood, I mean, we've had funny moments of like, what's that word? But there's never been a moment where like, I absolutely couldn't understand what you were telling me or saying. So I would definitely highlight that there's variation, but that's it really, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's, so I know a lot of the students at the school are Spanish. Yeah. So the example that I now hear a lot, because I also speak Spanish, is that I don't actually speak Spanish. I speak Mexican.
Yeah.
Because I learned to speak Spanish in California, and I grew up really close to the Mexican border. So we learned Mexican Spanish as opposed to Spain Spanish. And, some of the words are different, but at the same time, you can understand each other.
Absolutely. That's it.
So that's the kind of comparison that I never thought of before either. But yeah, if you learned British English and then you go to the US either to travel or you move there, they're going to understand you just fine.
100%.
They even like it when you pronounce things differently or say things different, because then it's like you're like really cool and exotic, and you've seen the world, and they really love that. So that won't be a problem. Mm-hmm. And then I get, people chuckle here when I say tomato or zebra or things. And sometimes they'll ask me, to say certain words in American English. So it's never been a problem for me.
In terms of understanding, no, it's good. No. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining us on this video. You might be back for another one.
I would happily be back, any time. I had a lot of fun putting this together.
No, it was really good. Thank you so much. And we'll hopefully see you again in another one. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.